This is the last unit we're going to cover this year, and it's got some really interesting stuff. A few of these things you may have heard before, but hopefully we'll have a more solid understanding by the time we're done. So here's the I can statement for section 12.1. I can understand mean, median, mode. So we're going to write the word mode right here, and something called dot plots. So we're going to look at some numbers and then also some displays. So the warm-up question here is, what do you think of when you hear the word statistics? So when you hear the word statistics, hopefully something comes to mind. Maybe if you're involved in sports, you think of things like points per game, or rebounds per game, or maybe runs batted in, or different things like that, like sports statistics. So I'm going to write the word sports right here. Maybe you think of charts that display statistics, maybe some graphs or something like that. Maybe you think of polls or surveys, because those are used a lot in statistics. Maybe percentages, averages, different things like that. There are lots of things that you might think of when you think of statistics. Well, one of the things we're going to do here is we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of statistics and maybe develop some of our statistical thinking skills a little bit. We're not going to do anything too terribly hard, not a bunch of algebra or different things like that. Just kind of getting in that statistical type of mode and talking about how those things work. And some of it's related to probability that we've talked about before. So let's talk about what statistics is. Statistics is the science of making decisions using data. So the science of making decisions using data. And lots of people use data. Manufacturers, engineers, educators, teachers like myself, businesses, and even parents want to make good decisions. We want to make good decisions. And one way that we can make better decisions is to use all of the information available to us. We wouldn't want to make a decision based on just a little bit of the information. We want to use all of the information we have at our disposal. And there are lots and lots of times where the information on which we base our decisions contains numbers. Lots of decisions are based on numbers. Think if you were a manufacturer, a business owner, or something like that, you would make decisions based on how much things cost, how much you can sell them for, and different things like that. So here's what statistics does. Statistics provides a set of organized rules we can use to make good decisions and also make convincing, we're going to call these arguments. Convincing arguments. So if you're having a discussion and you've got to convince your boss or somebody, hey, this is the right thing to do based on the information and the data that we have, statistics provides a set of rules where we can organize that information and make really good decisions and really good arguments. So mean, median, and mode are some of the most basic type of statistics. Statistics. Sometimes hard to spell and sometimes hard to say. Okay, these three statistics are ways of measuring where the center of the data is. So we're going to look at some data sets. We're going to look at some information. These numbers could represent grades or dollar amounts or different things like that. And a lot of times what we're interested in is, on average, what happens? Where's the center of this data? Okay, so there are ways of talking about what typically happens. There are ways of talking about what is average. What is average? Average. Okay, and I'm going to put average in quotes because when we say average, depending on what we're talking about, we might mean different things. Okay, so all three of these are ways of talking about what is average, what typically happens. So let's talk about what the mean is. Now, the mean is what we call the arithmetic average. So average. Arithmetic average. Okay, now that's how we say that word. So arithmetic is a noun, arithmetic is an adjective, if you want to get technical about things. So it's describing how we find that average, and it's what we normally talk about when we say the average. We add these things up and then we divide by however many there are. So if we're going to average, or if we're going to find the mean of 5 things, we add them up and divide by 5. If we're going to find the mean of 6 things, we add them up and divide by 6. So when we do these, we probably ought to rely on a calculator in order to figure this out for us. Sometimes we're going to add things up and they're going to be pretty big numbers, and then we're going to divide. It's not going to go in evenly. We might have a decimal or something like that. So we're going to rely on a lot with the calculator calculator to figure out the mean for us. Okay, the median, the word median actually means middle. So when we talk about the median, we're talking about the very middle data point, the very middle data point. Okay, so we've got the mean, that's the arithmetic average. That's what we typically think of when we talk about average. Add them up and divide by however many there are. Okay, median is the middle point. Now, the middle point, the median, is kind of a pain because the data set needs to be in numeric order. Most of them are not in numeric order. They're not from smallest to biggest or biggest to smallest. Normally we would put them in ascending order, small one first and then the biggest one last. But so the median can be a bit of a pain. All we have to do is find the middle point, but if there are lots of points, first of all we've got to put them in order, and then we've got to find the very middle point, okay? And then let's talk about the mode. The mode is the most frequently occurring. Most frequently occurring. So it's the one that occurs most often. Okay, and this one is actually pretty easy. All we need to do is just be aware of, okay, it's the one that occurs the most, and also be aware of the fact that we can have things that have bimodal. That means they have two modes. They can be multimodal. They can have lots of modes. And there are situations where there is actually no mode at all. There's not one that occurs more often than another. Okay, now a couple things I want to point out as we go through here. Statistics is kind of a branch of math, so we will see some formulas and stuff like that. And for mean and for median, it's a really good idea to know what n is. Now I've got a lowercase script n right here, and n represents the number of data points we have. Okay, so it represents the number of data points that we have. So that n is going to be really important, and as you go on in math, that is emphasized more and more, and you'll see that. So it's not a huge deal with the ones that we're dealing with so far, but it's not a bad idea. So it says find the mean, median, and mode for each set, and then it says if necessary round to the nearest tenth. So we'll go to the nearest tenth on these. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to add these up, and we're going to divide by, well, let's first of all, remember that whole n thing? Let's figure out how many there are altogether. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So n is 11 on this. So we're going to add these up and we're going to divide by 11. Now, I know that we're going to have to find the median, so I know we're going to have to put them in order anyway. Let's put them in order and then let's add them up that way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look through and I'm going to find the smallest one. The smallest one is 1. Now, I like being really organized about these. I'm going to go through and say, okay, I got that one. There's another one, and if you put them right underneath them, it's kind of a way of keeping track of, you know, and lining up and make sure that we've written down all the numbers here. So we've got 4 1s, and then we've got a 2 here and a 2 here. So we're going to write a 2 here and a 2 there. We've got a 3, got a 3 right there. We've got a 4, done with that one. We have a 5, and we have a 6. And we have a 7. So let's go through and count them up. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we've got all of them written down. Now, if you want to grab a calculator for something like this, you're welcome to. Go right ahead. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put these together, and I'm going to say those add up to be 4. I'm going to put, let's see, these together. Those add up to be 4. Those add up to be 7. And those add up to be 11, and that's 7. So I'll just add them up right here. So what we've got here is we've got 8 and 7 is 15. Let's see, 15 plus 11. 15 plus 11 would be 26, and 26 plus 7 would be 33. So when we add all of those up, we get 33. Now remember, we want to find the mean, the arithmetic average, so we're going to divide by 11. So this is the sum when we add all of those together, and this is n. So we're going to add them up, and then we're going to divide out by however many there are. So that means that the mean on this one, the mean is 3. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and circle that. Now, this next one, we want to find the middle one, and there are a couple different ways to do this. I'm going to zoom in on this so we can kind of run through and count along here. I'm going to show you one way that people will do this that works if as long as the data sets are not too big. So we kind of just start at the end and say, okay, I'm just going to march in from the outside, and we're going to figure out as we cross through here. Well, we've crossed off 5 on this side and 5 on that one, so that one is the very middle one. Okay, so we've got that as the middle one, and I'm going to get rid of these marks right there. So the middle one we said was right here, and I'm going to change colors. The middle one is right there. So we end up with the median, the middle one being 2. Now I want to show you something that's actually pretty useful. It's this formula right here. So the formula n plus 1 over 2 can be used to find the median. It can be used to find the median, and this will really come in handy, and I'll show you why in just a second. So this is what the formula says to do. We take whatever n is, so that's going to be 11, we add 1 to it, and we divide by 2. Well, that's 12 divided by 2, so we end up with 6. What that means is the sixth one in order should be the middle point. If there are 11 altogether, the sixth one should be the middle one. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, if you think about it, that would have been a little bit easier than kind of going in from the ends. And more importantly, and this is what I was going to get to, what if instead of 11 points, what if it had 111 and we had to find the middle point? Marching in from the outsides and kind of crossing these off as we go through and going like that, that would take us a long time if there were 111 points. So knowing, hey, all I need to do is use this formula and it's going to tell me exactly where I need to go. I need to go find the sixth one. If they're already in order, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the median and we're all set to go. Okay, all right, let's take a look at the last one. The last one is the mode, and the mode is the one that occurs the most. So let's go through here and take a look, and I'm going to work backwards. The 7 only occurs once, the 6 occurs once, the 5 occurs once, same with 4 and 3. 2 occurs twice, that's more often than any of the other ones, but 1 occurs 4 different times. So what that means is on this particular one, the mode happens to be 1. Now you'll notice that these 3 different measures of center, if you want to think of it that way, they're all different. One of them is 3, one of them is 2, and one of them is mode. So when we say average, we mean lots of different things when we talk about the average. The average is what typically happens. So if we were to say the mean, the arithmetic average, on average, like literally the average, the mean of those is 3. Okay, that's kind of like the balancing point, the one that would be right in kind of balancing the two sides of the data set. The median, it doesn't care how many 1s there are or how many 7s there are or anything like that. It only cares how many there are on either side, no matter how big or how small they are. Okay, so that literally is right in the middle. Okay, it doesn't take into account that this one could have been 77, it could have been 870 or something like that. We don't care about them, we just want to know which one is the middle occurring point. And then the mode is the one that occurs most often, so that would also be a way of talking about what typically happens. Yeah, gosh, if these were numbers on a spinner, looks like 1 comes up a lot or something like that. So all 3 of these are very useful. They're different ways of talking about what typically happens on a data set. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. The next one is a little bit different, and it's a little bit different for a couple of reasons. It's got decimals in it, and if we go through, I'm going to go through and I'm going to count how many there are. Remember, n's an important thing on each one of these. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. N is equal to 6. We've got 6 points on this one. Now, let's go ahead and put them in order because we know we're going to have to do that anyway. So we're going to put 2.1, 2.1, so we got those taken care of. Next one's 3.3, got that one taken care of. 4.6, and again, being organized about this is a really good thing. Helps you keep things straight and make sure you haven't made any mistakes. So we've got these in order. Now let's go ahead and let's find the mean. If we find the mean, we have to add those up and divide by 6. So I'm going to grab the calculator and we'll throw these in here. Now if you want to do a little bit of it in your head, that's totally okay. Like I could put 2.1 plus 2.1, or I could just say 4.2 plus 3.3 plus 4.6 plus 5.5 plus 6.7. Now, because I often make mistakes as I'm using my stylus to put these in here, those add up to 4.2, so I've got 4.2, 3.3, 4.6, 5.5, and 6.7. So I've added those up the right way. If I add them up, I end up with 24.3. So the sum is 24.3, and we're going to divide by 6. So let's see, divide that by 6, and we end up with 4.05. So 4.05. Now, it did say round to the nearest tenth, so let's go ahead and round that to the nearest tenth. This is the tenths place. Or actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to underline it and point to that one right there. So the question is, does that stay a 0, or is this enough to bump it up to a 1? It is enough to bump it up to a 1 because that's a 5. So we're going to say 4.1. So 4.1. Now, one thing I want you to notice about the mean is that there is no 4.1 in here. Okay, the closest we get is probably that 4.6. We're going to come back to that in just a second. So I'm going to change colors again. Let's find the median. So the median is going to be, remember, it's going to be n plus 1 divided by 2. So that's going to be 6 plus 1 divided by 2. That's 7 divided by 2. So we get 3.5. Okay, so here's the cool thing. This is what that means. What it means is we can't have, like, it's not the third one and it's not the fourth one. It's in between the third and the fourth one. So literally that's what we're going to do. We're going to come through here and we're going to say, okay, it's in between the third and the fourth one. So we're going to say this one and this one. Well, how would we find the middle of those 2 points right there? Well, to find the middle of those 2 points, we literally would add those up and divide by 2. So we're going to do 3.3 plus 4.6, and we'll divide by 2. It's kind of like finding the mean of those 2 points. We're going to average those. Okay, so when we add those together, let's see, we end up with, go ahead and throw that in the calculator, 3.3 plus 4.6. So we get 7.9. So we get 7.9, and then we're going to divide by 2. So let's see how this turns out. Divide by 2, and we end up with 3.95. Okay, so 3.95. So that is the median. The median is 3.95. So I'll go ahead and circle that, and now we're on the last one. Now we're on the mode. So the mode is the most frequently occurring, and you'll notice that the only one that occurs more than once is the 2.1. So the mode on this one is 2.1. So let's go ahead and circle those. And then I want to talk about this. The mean is 4.1. Well, that's not in our data set. The median is 3.95. There's no 3.95 in here in our data set either. Mode is 2.1. Well, gosh, at least there's a 2.1 in here, and this will happen a whole bunch. So I'm going to zoom back out here, and let's take a look here. So the mode, there's a 1 there. The mode, 2.1, yep, there's a 2.1 there. The median is 2. There's a 2 right there. So these are both in our data set, and that one is in our data set. But the mean, let's see, there was a 3, okay? On this one, there wasn't a 4.1, and there wasn't a 3.95. So that's why some people will argue that the median and the mode they're often a better way to talk about what typically happens because they're actually numbers from our data set. But we actually use the mean more often than we do anything else. So it's a really good idea to be familiar with each one of those. So mean, median, and mode. Remember, mean, arithmetic average. Median literally means the middle, so it's the middle point. And then mode is the one that happens most often. Now, displaying data in charts and graphs, that can be really helpful to make good decisions and also to make convincing arguments. A lot of times if people see a picture of the data, that's a pretty convincing thing. So you can also find some patterns and some features in a data set that aren't obvious just by looking at the numbers. So if we have a chart or a picture of what's going on, that can be really helpful. So one common type of display is called a dot plot. And this is actually an example of a dot plot. So this is the number of people in a van. So we've got these vans going by, and they just kind of kept track of how many people were in each one. So you'll notice that there were 2 vans that had 1 person in it. 1 van that had 2 people in it, and this literally is, as we stack up the number of dots, that literally is just the number of vans that had 3 people in them. There were 3 vans with 3 people, 2 vans with 4 people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 vans with 5 people, and then 2 vans again back with 2 people. Okay, so that's how a dot plot works. We have this horizontal axis that we scale, and we have a number underneath each one of those, and then the number of dots above that represents how many of those data points we have. So this literally represents 2 4s there. Okay, now we're actually going to go through and we're going to make a dot plot for this data set. But before we do that, we actually want to go through and we want to find the mean, the median, and the mode for this picture right here. So the data is displayed here, but we actually we don't know what the numbers are to represent that. So again, we're going to use mean, and then we're going to find the median, and we're going to find the mode. Okay, whoops, change colors there, the mode. All right, so let's see. One of these is really easy to pick out just by looking at it. The mode is the most frequently occurring, and you can tell just by looking at the graph that the mode has to be 5. So we've got that one done right now. We've got that one taken care of. Okay, now the median, again, we could kind of march in from the outside, but let's count how many there are. There are 2 here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there are 16 data points. So I'm going to write down that n equals 16 here. So if we do n plus 1, divide by 2, that's 17 divided by 2. That means 8.5. So that means it's going to be between the 8th one and the 9th one. So let's count through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's the 8th one right here, and here's the 9th one right there. So that means the median is right in between the two of those. So it's going to be right in between 4 and 5, and right in between 4 and 5 would be 4.5. So we're going to do 4.5 there. So we've got the median. Okay, now to find the mean, we literally have to add these up. So there's 1, 1, and another 1. So this is 2. There's a 2. That's a 3, a 3, and a 3. So those add up to 9. That's 2 4s. They add up to 8. Let's see, how many 5s did we have again? We had 6 5s, so that's going to be 30. And then we've got 2 6s, so that adds up to be 12. So we're literally going to add all of those up. So again, this is a 2, a 2, a 9, an 8, a 30, and a 12. And hopefully you can see where those numbers come from. So I'm going to go ahead and add those together on the calculator. Again, we'll rely on that quite often. So we've got, I'm just going to say that's a 4 plus a 9 plus an 8 plus a 30 plus a 12, and we end up with 63. And then remember, we need to know what we divide by. There's actually 16 data points here, so we're going to divide that by 16, and we end up with 3.93. So again, we're going to round to the nearest tenth. That is not enough to bump that up to a, let's see, so the question here is it 3.9 or is it 4.0 basically? That's not enough to bump it up, so we're going to call that 3.9. So 3.9 right there. Okay, so even if we've got a display, we can still find those right here. And then on example number 3, all we have to do is make a dot plot for this. We're not going to find the mean, median, and mode on these. So let's see, we've got this data set right here. I do want to point this out. We can also use an X for these. Now, you'll notice this data set looks kind of familiar. It's the one that we used, I think, in example 1 up above. But here's what we can do on this. We know that there aren't any zeros, there aren't any negative numbers. The smallest one is a 1, so we're going to call that a 1. And then a 2, then a 3, then a 4. So we're just going to scale our axis like this, and then a 6. And that is the biggest one. And then the cool thing about this is we don't have to put them in order. We're just going to keep track of them as we go. So there's a 1. I'm going to put an X right there. There's another 1. Now, you do need to be careful about making these all the same size. So there are four 1s. Let's see, we've got a 2 here, and we've got a 2 here. So there are 2 X's. We've got a 3, done with that one, no other 3s. We've got a 4, no other 4s. We've got a 5, no other 5s. We've got a 6. And this is the value of kind of crossing these off as we use them. And again, I can still tell what numbers there are, so don't scribble them out, just kind of lightly cross them off. I didn't see that there was a 7 there originally, so I just make a mark here, put a 7, put an X there, and there's my dot plot or my X plot. Again, you could use whatever shape you want as long as they're all consistently sized, and then you can look at this and you can tell, gosh, the mode is right here. And if we go back up here and take a look at this, did we find a mode of 1? We did, yep. So we're right there in good shape. Okay, so there's actually a display that represents this data set right here in example 1a. Okay, that's it. Talking about mean, median, mode. Those are measures of what typically happens, kind of measures of what the center of the data point is, what's on average, and then another way to display that information using a dot plot.